the things that's nice about Unity Fellowship is the fact that no matter whether you're white, black, brown, purple, green, gay, straight, bi, trans, you're welcome here. It's just the mindset of everybody here, and Pastor Bob all the way down. Everybody here. It's it's home, and you feel like you're going home. You feel like you're in a big accepting family when you're here.
So what makes Unity Fellowship different from other churches in Owensboro is their focus on making sure that everyone feels welcomed and accepted with no conditions. They're accepting of the LGBTQ plus community, of different people from different backgrounds and cultures, and this is what really led me to joining Unity Fellowship. And I also feel like many churches focus on the individual, but we are actually meant to be in relationship with others. The concept of Ubuntu, that if one person is oppressed, that all people are oppressed. And I feel like Pastor Bob, in his sermons, he really focuses on systemic injustices and oppression, and that God is on the side of the oppressed.
Well, after many years of being out of the church, we came to a point where we were ready to find a church, but I in particular knew that I no longer wanted a part of what I had experienced as a younger person. My soul and spirit had just no longer aligned with what I was being taught about myself. So I left the church for many years, and then as a couple years later, we decided we wanted to return to a church. So a new part of that had to be a church that was totally accepting and that not just welcome to come to the door, but could fully participate in all regard, should we desire. And so we began to visit churches, and we visited Unity Fellowship a while back, and felt like we had made a discovery in a church home.
And we also like this church because it's a teaching church. Every Sunday we have the opportunity after the service, or even sometimes during it, if we have questions and we're not sure of what he's talking about, or if we have questions as to the sermon that he's preaching, that we're allowed to do that. And it's something that I've never had in a church. It's been very enlightening, and I've learned a lot about myself, and I've learned about a lot of things, actually. And above and beyond anything else, I know that I'm loved. I know that Scott's loved, and I know that we're loved together.
And so it's not just like going to mass at a big church and you just go in, hear the thing, get up and leave. Here you actually are charged with asking yourself, what does it mean? And the membership is small enough we can all interact during the sermon as well as after the sermon. So we can ask each other questions. You learn from other people with their comments or their questions about whatever we're discussing that week or what was discussed the week before or whatever. And unlike a large church where you just know the people from sight, you actually know the people here. Whether they are active in doing something or they're just here every week and they participate in how are you doing and stuff like that. Or they tell you how somebody else that they've talked to that you haven't seen is doing. So it's like a very large, it's not just a church family, it's a large family.
Just because you came from a Baptist background or a Pentecostal background or a Catholic background doesn't mean you're not welcome. Unity will surprises a lot of people because everyone is accepted. You will feel comfortable. You won't feel out of place. You won't feel judged. You'll feel like you belong.
folks. This is Pastor Bob coming to you from Unity Fellowship. You may be really sick of church. You may have given up on church a long time ago, and maybe you're not even looking for a place. But I want to invite you to a faith community where you'll be safe, where you can be accepted for who you are, always, for whoever you are right now on your faith journey. Check us out on Facebook Live. Check us out on Zoom. I think you'll find a place that you're safe, a place that you'll be accepted, a place that you'll feel comfortable.
What makes Unity Fellowship different from other churches in Owensboro is their focus on making sure that everyone feels welcomed and accepted with no conditions. They're accepting of the LGBTQ plus community, of different people from different backgrounds and cultures, and this is what really led me to joining Unity Fellowship. This community, at its heart, is open to everyone, and even if you are on the fence and you might disagree, we are still open to having that dialogue and that discussion that fosters growth and understanding. So I feel like the people who come to Unity Fellowship are so open and loving that even if you didn't agree with something that the church promotes, that you're still able to express that and not be judged.
I'm service director here at Unity, and we are so glad to have you here. I just want you all to know that you're in a safe space, a judgment-free zone. Pardon me? It is on.
I think you need to be turned up just a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
that's better.
Hello?
That
We
was
can hear
better.
you.
Okay. Let me scoot my chair closer. Okay, how's that?
Good.
Great.
Over from the beginning? Good morning, everybody. Welcome. My name is Chrissy Bray Cotton, and we are so glad to have you here. You are in a safe space. I'd like to introduce to you our associate pastor, Gator Lone Wolf.
Good morning. I want to echo Chrissy's welcome, that you are affirmed and in a safe space. And I want to turn it over to our senior pastor, Bob Coombs.
Thank you, Chrissy and Gator. Welcome, everyone. I know you've already heard that, but it doesn't hurt to be heard more than once. We're so, so glad that you have found us wherever in the world you are. Know that you are welcomed and affirmed. Every molecule of your body, of your being, is welcome and affirmed here at Unity Fellowship. And back to Chrissy to introduce our first video.
Okay. Our first video today is Illuminative and Mag 7, One World. Okay, now it's time for news, joys, and concerns. If you're on Zoom, you can just unmute. Facebook Live, you can type in the chat. Or if you're here in person, just wave your hand and we'll have Darian bring you a mic. News, joys, and concerns.
I want to start, if I could, prayers for my cousin's family, Bobby Gillum. He lost his battle with cancer Thursday morning, and his kids are having a really rough time, and so are his siblings. So just being prayers for that family.
Thank you, Daniel, of course.
Certainly. I have a couple of prayer requests and an announcement to make. Start with the announcement. The family meeting that was scheduled for next Sunday has been postponed until February the 2nd. So you may not know if you haven't been coming to Unity for a long time. We don't have a lot of meetings, but when we do, we call them family meetings. We will talk about the business of the church. We rarely vote on anything, but you'll hear some reports and hear some nominations for people to serve on the board and a few other items. But we don't keep a membership roll. Everyone who attends, even if it's the first time you've stepped foot in this building or first time you have joined us virtually, you're considered part of the family. So it will be after worship next Sunday, February the 2nd. Not next Sunday, 2 Sundays from now. Postponed from next Sunday. Prayer requests. First of all, would ask you to keep Debbie and myself in your prayers this week. We go back to Nashville to the oncologist there. And Debbie always gets nervous, as do I. As we get close to those visits, they'll do a whole workup, blood and various other things to see what her numbers are with her multiple myeloma. And then they'll decide whether or not to restart any treatment based on those numbers. So we always pray for good result from those tests. And ask you to join us in praying for that. Like I said, we get a little anxious as it gets close to those meetings. That's on Wednesday. Secondly, I've got good news and bad news to report. Good news is that Pastor Tong and his wife had a baby girl back on January the 4th. So we rejoice with them. The bad news is that she's in the hospital. She has RSP. Right now, and very young, just a couple of weeks old. Be praying for that family and for baby name is Lily Zing.
Hi, my name is Craig.
Craig.
I just wanted to point out some of my joys. I have a birthday tomorrow. Thank you. I had some family visit yesterday, and I prayed for a joyous time, and God certainly delivered. It was a joyous time. I was very happy to see them. And I also have the following day, on the 21st, a milestone in my recovery, if you will. So I'm very excited about that. There's a lot to be joyful for in my life.
Well,
Congratulations.
yeah,
Thank you.
we're rejoicing with you, Craig.
I'd like to have prayers for the Murphy family. They lost their son. He was 47 and he had cancer and he went fast. And I also would like prayers for my great granddaughter, Hayden, who's having a hard time right now.
Mm.
And please pray for her. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Of course, Becky.
Thank you, Becky.
Okay, it's me. I know last week I asked everybody for prayers for my husband because he had to go for a procedure this week. And it came back looking pretty good. They did have to send off a few biopsies, so we're waiting on that. But it doesn't look bad at all. So, very thankful. Also, a joy is I'm really, really happy to see like several new faces in this room today. I know Pastor
Awesome.
Bob and Gator can't see that from where they're at, so I wanted to say that out loud for them.
Thank you. Welcome,
Yeah,
folks.
welcome.
Glad you're here.
Anybody else have new joys or concerns?
Of course, we haven't been here for 2 weeks, and I'm glad that we are able to meet together today. That the weather permitting, we'll continue to be able to meet together. Uh, Last concern I had was about 3 weeks ago. I had to have 2 teeth cut out, and that went good. It actually went better than I expected, and the doctor also thought it went real well too. So sometimes things work out, and it's not the best thing in the world, but it happened, and so I'm thankful that I've got that done, got it out of my way, and I don't have to worry about that again.
Good.
Anyone else? Pastor G, would you like to lead us in prayer this week?
Sure. Y'all would pray with me? Oh, Creator, we come to you on this cold Sunday morning. Each of us with prayer concerns that we've raised, some not raised. Ask that you walk with us and be with those in need. Give them courage and strength to face the unknown and even the known. We give thanks for the praises this morning as well, and ask that you continue to show us the small good things that are happening in our lives, even when we don't catch them or see them. Lastly, focus our hearts and minds on the message this morning. Remind us that even though inaugurations happen, anxiety may overwhelm us. There is good in this world, and remind us that we can cling to each other for hope and strength. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Now, if you'll join me for our affirmation of togetherness. We gather in oneness together. We praise and worship God together. We proclaim God together. We welcome and affirm all persons in God's love together. We seek to live for God in every breath and heartbeat together. You can join our contact list by texting ADD to 270-201-5022. It'll send back a form. You don't have to fill the whole thing out if you don't want to, but if you would send us your name, that way we know who we're messaging. And if you'd like to, you can support this ministry one of several ways. You can use our new app. You can click the donate button on our Facebook page, or you can go old school and mail it to P.O. Box 1401, Owensboro, Kentucky 42302. If you're here in person, we have a collection plate at each door to the sanctuary as well. Unity will never make you feel bad or guilt you into giving. We do a whole lot with very little money. So if you'd like to support us, we appreciate everything. Now I'd like to introduce our second video of the day. Brandon Heath, Give Me Your Eyes.
So we are continuing with our series, Hope Against Hope. We want to begin with our breakout question this morning, and the breakout question has to do with continuing with our series, Hope. Oh, hang on. Need to. Want to begin with our breakout question this morning. Getting some feedback here. Breakout question.
Yeah, I hear it.
Hang on. See what I can do. Okay, that better?
Yes.
So we're continuing with our series, Hope Against Hope. And I want to begin with our breakout question this morning, which is, when have your eyes been opened to the hurts and needs of others? What circumstances help to make you more aware of those around you?
I remember during Hurricane Katrina, I worked as a telephone operator, and at the time we were the only call center in the United States that could receive calls, and we were getting a lot of live calls from Hurricane Katrina, and it was probably the hardest thing I've ever been through. And I knew it was terrible from the news, but I didn't know it was that bad until I got on the phone with those people.
That proximity to it made a difference, didn't it?
Yes.
Sorry. Go ahead, Becky.
Oh, I was just going to say, the news media sure brings a lot to us in our home, with floods and tornadoes and all of that. And they're always asking to help, for people to help. That's the fires.
Yeah. And sometimes that gets to us and gets to our attention, but sometimes we become a little immune to it as well. Just the constancy of the media attention sometimes makes us immune, I think. All right, Sarah Jane, I think we cut you off.
That's okay. Many, many years ago, when our son started to kindergarten, I was made aware of just how many kids were in need that lived right around us that I had previously just not seen. And I had grown up without a lot, and my husband grew up without a lot. But when Nick started to public school, I was just amazed at how many kids there are that don't have what they need to survive, much less to succeed and do well.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah Jane.
Bob, one instance that, as you asked, raised my attention was when Dominique and I visited Israel back in 2014. And we got to go to the West Bank and noticed canisters on top of the roofs that collect water for the Palestinians, and they had bullet holes in them. And we were told that the Israeli military shot those out to make it more difficult for those folks to stay there so that that land could be taken. See children begging on the streets for food, right next to affluents, or seeing a bridge for Palestinians to cross over. They weren't allowed to even touch the ground in certain places. They had to cross a bridge. So that was very graphic to me.
Yeah.
In reference to what Gator was talking about, this morning as we were leaving, they had the hostage release on TV where 3 of the ladies that had been held for, I forget how many days, 400 days or something like that in captivity. had been released. So I hope that this works out where all those people can get released and get back to their homes.
Yeah.
I hate to admit, but knowing about all the refugees and what they've had to come through and how far they've had to go on foot with only the few belongings they could carry,
Yeah.
I never, until the picture showed up online, on screen, then they became actually real to me. That they looked like me, they acted like me, and they could be me.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry it took me so long to make it personal.
Yes. Teresa Lee writes on Facebook, I've noticed people using the Owensboro chat or Owensboro Helps group on Facebook to find homeless family members where homeless people gather and uh, relay shelter information during the cold weather. I knew there were homeless people, but I'm seeing more how life works for them. Thanks for sharing, Teresa. Someone else, a time when your eyes were open to the needs of others, the circumstances that caused that to happen for you. My thanks to those of you who shared. This is intended to be an interactive experience. These are not monologue sermons, or at least they're not fully monologue sermons. And so we invite you to participate with us and interact with us on a regular basis. So thank you, those of you who did today. You'll get another opportunity in a few minutes to interact. But let's go ahead and start with the teaching for the day. We are in a series called Hope Against Hope. Noting that cultural and political shifts have created an environment of uncertainty that in biblical times people face similar fears and upheaval. In fact, the Bible is a treasure trove of examples to help us cope with this season of discontent. The people of Israel were experts almost at living under oppressive regimes. They began as slaves in Egypt, then Assyria and Babylon. And by the New Testament, they were being occupied by Rome. So this series is an opportunity for us to double down on hope, hope against hope, which is to hope very strongly for something, even though it feels unlikely. The idiom hope against hope has been used for centuries, found in literature and religious texts and everyday conversations. Um, some experts believe that the Apostle Paul may have been one of the very first to reference that phrase, hope against hope. In Romans 4:18, he writes, referring to Abraham, hoping against hope, he believed that he would become the father of many nations, according to what was said, so shall your descendants be. Having any heir and in their advanced ages seemed unlikely to Abram and Sarah, much less many nations of heirs. But Abraham and Sarah clung to that hope, hope against hope. Let's pause for our scripture reading for the day. Pastor G has that for us.
One day, after Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and saw their forced labor. he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. When he went out the next day, he saw two Hebrews fighting, and he said to the one who was in the wrong, "Why do you strike your fellow Hebrew?" He answered, "Who made you a ruler and judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, "Surely the thing is known." When Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses. So Moses fled from Pharaoh.
Thank you, Pastor G. So today we're looking at Moses' identity crisis, his struggle with privilege and prejudice. But before we get into that, let's review the backstory. Moses was born the child of a Hebrew slave, and by all rights, he should have had a life of oppression and heavy labor, the life of a slave. Actually, being born at all was a miracle in itself. He had already avoided two threats in his life. Pharaoh, who was very insecure, was threatened by the growing population of the Hebrew immigrants. Empire does not take kindly to threats, whether they're real or imagined. And so he ordered the midwives to the Hebrews to make sure that any Hebrew boy babies were not live births. And when that didn't thin the herd, he ordered all the Hebrew boys to be thrown into the Nile River to drown. But Moses' mother, in desperation, fashioned a basket boat for the child and launched it into the Nile to save him. Miraculously, it worked. Not eaten by crocodiles, but saved by an Egyptian princess. Excuse me. He escaped the hard life of a slave altogether. The princess took the baby boy, adopted him as her own, and Moses was raised as a prince in a palace. He had all the perks and privileges of the empire: the best schools, the finest clothing, gourmet foods, never wanting, never needing. He had a life of luxury and liberty, possibly in line even to become the next Pharaoh. And though he did absolutely nothing to earn it or deserve it, he has a sense of entitlement, as most people do who live in privilege. All the while, he was never too far from the life that he could have had. His birth family was crafty. His sister had watched from the bushes when he was discovered by the princess and retrieved from the river. Then his sister rushed in and offered to find a wet nurse for him. And so it was that while Moses was raised in the palace, he was nursed, nurtured, and raised by his birth mother. And reading between the lines, it seems that young Moses knew all about his birth family. His mother Jochebed, his sister Miriam, and his brother Aaron. He was fully aware of who he was and where he was from. But let's not forget about the adoptive mother, the Egyptian princess, who snatched the Hebrew baby out of the river. It could not have happened that he would have this contact with his birth family without her collusion. She defiantly brought this Hebrew baby boy into the palace, along with his Hebrew wet nurse and birth mother. And unlike her father, this Egyptian princess did not seem to be threatened at all by people who were different from her. And she showed considerable cultural sensitivity as well by allowing Moses access to his birth family, knowing and all of their traditions. So it's not really a surprise that as Moses is coming of age, um, he would begin to question everything that he had taken for granted earlier in life. Moses had an identity crisis over the class divide um, that he was finally seeing. His eyes were being opened. Webster's defines identity crisis as a period of uncertainty and confusion in which a person's sense of identity becomes insecure, typically due to a change in their expected aims or role in society. It's an awakening of social consciousness. I don't want to oversimplify the complex issues of life and society. Everything's not really black and white. Moses is trying to juggle what it all means for him, to figure out which side he's going to identify with, the Hebrew side or the Egyptian side. But the text reads that we've read this morning gives us a hint as to which way young Moses is beginning to lean. Twice in the text, we are told that he is out among his people, or he is with his own people. He knew that his people were really the Hebrew people and not the Egyptian people. And so, in this Exodus story, life really begins for Moses when he decides to take sides. When Moses stops being a neutral observer and becomes a willing participant in the struggle for justice and human rights. And that's where we pick up the story of Moses' life today. His first reaction to having his eyes opened is to fight. He's out among his people. He has the oversight of slave projects. And it's unlikely it's the first time he's seen a Hebrew beaten. But surely he could have ordered the beating to stop, but something snaps inside of him. Probably been brewing for a long time. It snaps and he kills and then, out of guilt, buries the Egyptian overlord. Moses resorts to the power of the empire. He knows that he's a person of power. He has the ability and opportunity to exercise that power by taking the life of this Egyptian overlord. He stoops to the same level of violence that he has experienced in the palace as a person of privilege. The next day, he sees and hears two fellow Hebrews fighting, again, identifying with them as fellow Hebrews, and he intervenes in their fight with each other. He's surprised to find out that his Hebrew brothers know what he's done. And further, he's surprised when they're not interested in keeping it secret. They're not protecting this Egyptian overlord, Moses. Even though Moses is beginning to identify with them, they are not identifying with him. And it's not easy to hide a crime when other people are willing to tell about it. Anyway, word quickly spreads back to Pharaoh, or at least he's worried that it gets back to Pharaoh, and Moses has a second choice to make. Instead of fighting, this time he takes flight. Moses runs. He takes refuge in the land of Midian. It's near the end of the Gulf of Aqaba, or Saudi Arabia is where he runs to. Excuse me. And so that's another way that we can respond to injustice. It's interesting that Moses flees to the desert where he can literally hide his head in the sand. Act as if it doesn't exist. Ignore the injustice. Wash your hands. It doesn't involve me. There's a story of a woman who sitting in a very nice restaurant, and she is near the window to the street. As she's eating in this nice restaurant, enjoying her meal, she sees two ragamuffin kids standing at the window, just kind of staring in. And she calls the waiter over. She asks if something can be done about that. The waiter doesn't really know what to do. And eventually, what he does is just pull the drapes closed. To which the woman says, "There, that's better." Sometimes we just hide our heads. Sometimes we want to know nothing about the injustice that is around us, and we keep silent. Elie Wiesel said, "What hurts the victim most is not the cruelty of the oppressor, but the silence of the bystander." And echoing that, Martin Luther King Jr. said, "There comes a time when silence is betrayal. Your life begins to end the moment you start being silent about the things that matter." We can fight and use the same tools of violence of the oppressors, or we can take flight, or we can do what is right. It took Moses a while. He spent several years in the desert trying to figure out what his next move was going to be. God spoke to him and helped him to form those thoughts towards justice and how to act in justice. And here we are in this period of time where there's lots of time for us to think, lots of time for thought, just like Moses in the desert. This is an environment for us to think together, a time to organize, a time to game plan, a time to network. It is not a time to take flight. It is a time to speak up and speak out. Elie Wiesel also wrote these words: "I swore never to be silent whenever and wherever human beings endure suffering and humiliation. We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim, and silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented." So let us be using this time to think, using this time to organize and prepare for what is ahead, to network, but never to be silent during this time. Let us not allow that call to silence to keep our mouths shut. I want to end with a poem by Ruth Calkin called "I Wonder." "You know, Lord, how I serve you with great emotional fervor in the limelight. You know how eagerly I speak for you at the Woman's Club. You know how I effervesce when I promote a fellowship group. You know my genuine enthusiasm at a Bible study. But how would I react, I wonder, if you pointed to a basin of water and asked me to wash the calloused feet of a bent and wrinkled old woman? Day after day, month after month, in a room where nobody saw and nobody knew. Amen." I invite your response, reactions, observations. what are your thoughts this morning as we draw this teaching to a close? Your opportunity to interact with us. Questions are welcome.
Hi, this is Craig.
Hey, Craig.
I just wanted to say that I agree with what you were saying. It reminds me of a lot of what I've read and learned over the years. No choice is a choice. Um, and as you said, no choice often helps the oppressor.
Yeah.
So also regarding, kind deeds and charity and so forth, I also agree that, well, not so much agreement, but to what you were implying there. I believe if you do it just to be seen, if you do it for glory or fame, it does diminish or undermine the goodness of the deed.
Yeah.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Just as a reminder of how this part works, if you are watching virtually on Facebook, you can put something in the chat and we will read it. If you're on Zoom, you can unmute and we will hear you speak. And if you're in the sanctuary there, wave a hand, we'll get a microphone to you so that everybody who's with us today, whether virtual or in person, can hear your comments. Your observations, your questions, your thoughts, reactions.
Bob,
Yes, Carol.
I have to say that there are times when I'm really grateful for the internet. First, it shows me the atrocities, but it also shows me the groups that are forming or that have ideas that can help, which I would never have known about before, and give me the opportunity to either join or not join.
Right, right.
And I agree, this is definitely a time to network. I've overcome painful shyness, which I credit to Unity Fellowship in many ways, Pastor Bob. When you asked me to do this, I had to. And so it gives me the opportunity to become a part of a lot of local groups. And there is a lot going on even here in Owensboro. So that way I'm ready for whatever may happen.
Thank you, Chrissy.
I think sometimes we can bypass Moses as a human being, not a legendary figure.
Yeah.
That his heart was turned that day. He saw the Egyptian beating the slave, the Hebrew slave, and that while it was a rash decision, he murdered him. But at the same time, how many times have we seen absolute atrocity and nothing's being done?
Yeah, right.
For years and years and years. I'm not advocating murder, but the human side of Moses is fascinating. That he was so moved, he couldn't put his head down and walk on. There's something godly about that, not the fact that he was a murderer, but the fact that he was so drawn to put a stop to the abuse. So I drift back to that piece in your sermon, Bob.
Thank you, G.
This is Hunter.
Hey, Hunter.
I know, so when we talk about this sort of thing, we sort of run into the sort of like paradox of tolerance, because as Christians we are supposed to be tolerant of others, and we're supposed to show each other, patience and gentleness. But I believe firmly that you cannot be tolerant of intolerance. Is that
Yes.
when you see it, you have to combat it. You have to fight against it. Obviously, not to the point of Moses, of murder, or even violence in many options if it's avoidable. But you can't allow certain ideas that harm others to be open, to be seen as somewhat agreeable or acceptable if the conditions are right. You always have to
Right.
fight against it.
Hmm.
Thank you, Hunter. Good comments. Good thoughts. It is a hard balance. You use the word paradox, and I think that's accurate as well. But it's a hard place to figure out sometimes how we react to injustice. Um, we can have the two extremes, but somewhere in the middle, that third way or middle way um, that we saw exemplified by Martin Luther King Jr., the way of nonviolence, and Gandhi. Um, and they both patterned that after the words and actions of Jesus. So that nonviolent way of confronting without turning to violence. Anyone else? Other thoughts this morning? It is encouraging to me in this passage that those people who had proximity to power, Pharaoh's daughter and Moses, who had that kind of proximity to power, chose to go against that power of the empire in order to speak up for what is right and just. Um, it's not only those who are being oppressed who can have their eyes opened. It is also those who have proximity to power, and they are sometimes the ones who have the most ability to do something. In a few weeks, we're going to be talking about power, speaking to power. Um, and that's what Moses does eventually with Pharaoh. Any other observations or questions this morning? I want to thank you again for your participation. Um, always glad when you chime in and speak up. Um, so we will continue next week, and 2 weeks from today we'll have our family meeting. It'll be right after worship service, and hopefully you can join us for that as well. God bless you all. Have a good day.